Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now. Sit back and enjoy the story. Asterisk, the red Ferrari's twisted wreckage still haunted Sebastian Montclair's nightmares. 3 years after they pulled his wife's broken body from the driver's seat, rain drummed against the tall windows of his Napa Valley estate as he studied the 7th Nanny application this year, each predecessor having failed his impossible standards. Too vibrant, too alive, too much like Evangeline. The Montclair mansion. Sprawled across 300 acres of pristine vineyard, its Mediterranean architecture, a monument to wealth built on grief. Sebastian had stripped every trace of color from their world after the accident. Staff uniforms were charcoal gray. His daughter Luna's playroom contained only beige and white toys. Even the wine labels bore elegant monochrome designs instead. Of the deep purples and golds that had marked Montclair vintages for generations, color meant chaos. Chaos meant death. A taxi wound up the circular driveway at precisely 2 o'clock. Sebastian watched from his office as a woman emerged, her movements controlled and deliberate. Celeste Maro appeared exactly as her references described: professional, reserved, unremarkable. Her brown hair was pulled into a severe bun, her navy dress buttoned to the throat, her small suitcase, suggesting someone who traveled light through life. What her references hadn't mentioned was the way she moved like someone constantly calculating escape routes, or how her eyes scanned the surroundings. With the wariness of hunted prey, Sebastian recognized the signs because he carried similar wounds, though his were self-inflicted. "Miss Maro," Sebastian said as she entered his office. The room was designed to intimidate, all dark wood and leather. "Please sit." Celeste took the chair across from his mahogany desk, posture perfect, hands folded. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Montclair. I understand you have specific requirements." Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place. French, perhaps, which would explain her surname. But underneath lay something American and wounded. "My daughter Luna has experienced significant trauma. Her mother died when she was 3. Stability is paramount." Sebastian leaned back, studying her face for reactions. "The agency briefed you on our policies?" "Yes, sir." "Modest dress, quiet activities, educational focus only. No television, no electronic games, no overstimulation," she recited, the list like a prayer. "I also understand certain colors are discouraged." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Bright colors can be distressing for a child who has experienced loss. We prefer neutral environments." What he didn't say: red made him see Evangeline's blood on twisted metal, made him hear Luna's screams when she found her mother's lipstick, and tried to paint her face like Mommy used to. Red had been erased from their lives as thoroughly as Sebastian could manage. "I understand completely," Celeste said, something in her tone suggesting she truly did understand being surrounded by forbidden things. "May I ask about Luna's current state?" "See for yourself." Sebastian led her through marble hallways to the sunroom where Luna spent her afternoons. The 6-year-old sat at a small table, coloring with remarkable precision. Every line perfectly within boundaries, every section filled with beige, gray, or pale blue crayons. Luna Montclair was beautiful like her mother had been, with dark curls and expressive brown eyes. But where Evangeline had sparkled with manic energy, Luna moved through the world like a ghost child. Too careful, too quiet, too afraid of making mistakes. "Luna," Sebastian said softly, "I'd like you to meet Miss Maro. She may be staying with us." The little girl looked up with enormous eyes that always made Sebastian's heart ache. She stood, performed a perfect curtsy, extended her small hand formally. "How do you do, Miss Maro? I hope you find our home satisfactory." The words were too adult, too practiced. Sebastian saw Celeste's barely concealed reaction to this miniature woman trapped in a child's body. "The pleasure is mine, Luna," Celeste said, kneeling to the child's eye level. "That's beautiful coloring. You stay inside the lines perfectly." Luna nodded seriously. "Papa says it's important to follow rules and stay within boundaries. It keeps everyone safe." Celeste glanced up at Sebastian, something flashing in her eyes that might have been anger or grief. Rules can be important, she agreed carefully. But sometimes it's fun to see what happens when we color outside the lines. Just a little. Sebastian tensed, ready to intervene, but Luna simply looked confused. But then it would be wrong. Wrong things make Papa sad. That evening, after Luna had been fed, bathed, and tucked into bed with military precision, Sebastian found himself unable to concentrate on vineyard reports. Celeste had moved through household routines with quiet efficiency, but he sensed depths beneath her calm surface. During dinner, she'd coaxed Luna into conversation about books, drawing more words from his daughter than Sebastian had heard in weeks. When Luna mentioned wanting to see the horses, Celeste suggested they might visit tomorrow, pending Papa's approval. Sebastian had held his breath, waiting for Celeste to overstep boundaries, to push too hard, to bring chaos. Instead, she seemed to understand instinctively where lines were drawn, even as she gently tested their necessity. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Celeste appeared in the doorway, still wearing her modest navy dress. But something had changed. Her hair had escaped its severe bun in wispy tendrils that softened her face, and her formal posture had relaxed slightly. "I wanted to thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Montclair. Luna is remarkable. She's fragile," Sebastian said, the words sharper than intended. Previous nannies either frightened her with enthusiasm or dismissed her as cold. Luna is neither. She simply learned the world isn't safe. Celeste stepped closer, and Sebastian caught lavender perfume, subtle but somehow defiant in its femininity. "With respect, sir, Luna has learned that expressing herself isn't safe. There's a difference." The observation hit too close to home. Sebastian stood abruptly, pacing to windows overlooking moonlit vineyards. "Miss Maro, if you intend to revolutionize my household philosophy, I should warn you, such efforts have been attempted." "I have no intention of revolutionizing anything," Celeste said quietly. "I simply believe healing happens when we feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Luna is protecting herself the same way you're protecting her. But protection can become a prison." Sebastian turned to study her face in lamplight. "You speak from experience." "We all have experiences that shape how we view safety and risk," she replied diplomatically. "I would never judge your choices. I've simply observed that children need both security and room to grow. Finding that balance is the challenge." After Celeste left, Sebastian poured wine and stood in darkness, thinking about her words. She was right about Luna, and he knew it. But knowledge and action were different things. His daughter had become a perfect reflection of his own fears, controlled and controlling. Afraid to step outside narrow boundaries he'd established. How could he teach her to embrace life when he'd forgotten how to live it himself? In her small room in the staff wing, Celeste unpacked her meager belongings with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to travel light, to leave quickly when necessary. But something about this house, this broken man and his wounded daughter, made her want to stay longer than she should. She pulled a small photograph from her suitcase and set it on the nightstand. A little girl with bright red curls and a gap-toothed smile, frozen in time before everything went wrong. Before the fire, before the screaming. Before Celeste learned that love could kill as surely as hate. Tomorrow she would begin the delicate work of healing to damaged souls while hiding the cracks in her own. She only hoped her secrets wouldn't destroy them all before she found the courage to tell the truth. Because Celeste Maro wasn't just running from her past. She was running toward a reckoning that would shatter everything Sebastian thought he knew about the night his wife died. 3 weeks into Celeste's employment, Sebastian found Luna laughing. The sound stopped him cold outside the stable doors. When had he last heard his daughter's genuine laughter? At the polite chuckle she produced for guests, but real joy bubbling. Up from somewhere deep inside, through the weathered wood slats, he watched Celeste guide Luna's small hands as they brushed Duchess, the gentlest mare in his collection. Luna's pristine white dress was smudged with hay and dirt, her perfect ringlets escaping their ribbon. She looked like a child for the first time in 3 years. "She's so soft," Luna whispered, wonder coloring her voice. "Why don't we visit them more often? Sometimes grown-ups forget that beautiful things don't always have to be dangerous," Celeste said carefully, her eyes finding Sebastian through the gap in the doors. She'd known he was there, had probably orchestrated this entire scene. Sebastian's chest tightened. Evangeline had loved the horses, had ridden them recklessly through the vineyards with her red hair streaming behind her like a banner. After the accident, he'd avoided the stables entirely, paying staff to maintain them while keeping Luna safely distant. "Papa used to ride," Luna said, stroking Duchess's velvet nose. "Before Mama went to heaven, I remember watching from my window." "Maybe he'll ride again someday," Celeste suggested, never taking her eyes off Sebastian's hiding place. "When he's ready." That evening, Sebastian found Celeste in the kitchen after Luna's bedtime, preparing tea with the quiet efficiency she brought to everything. The domestic scene stirred something in him that he'd buried deep. "You deliberately exposed my daughter to potential danger today," he said, though his voice lacked its usual edge. Celeste didn't look up from the steaming kettle. "I exposed her to life, Mr. Montclair. There's a difference. She could have been kicked, thrown, trampled. She could also have learned that not everything beautiful in this world will hurt her." Celeste turned to face him, and in the kitchen's warm light, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "When was the last time Luna skinned a knee? Gotten dirty? Made a mistake that wasn't catastrophic?" Sebastian's jaw worked silently. The truth was too painful to voice. Luna had never experienced normal childhood mishaps, because he'd bubble-wrapped their entire existence. "I know you think I'm being careless with her safety," Celeste continued, pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups. "But there are different kinds of safety, Mr. Montclair. Physical safety, yes, but also emotional safety. The safety to be imperfect, to explore, to trust that love doesn't disappear when you step outside the lines." She offered him a cup there, fingers brushing as he took it. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, and from the way her eyes widened, she'd felt it too. "You don't understand," Sebastian said, his voice rougher than intended. "Everything I've done is to protect her from what happened to her mother, from what happens when people get reckless, when they stop being careful. What happened to Evangeline?" The question hung between them like smoke. Sebastian had never spoken his wife's name aloud to any of Luna's previous caretakers. He'd certainly never discussed the circumstances of her death. She was driving too, fast in the rain, coming back from another party, another photographer, another adventure that I apparently couldn't provide. The words tasted bitter. She was drunk, probably high, definitely unfaithful. The car went off the road because she was chasing excitement instead of caring about the daughter who needed her to come home safely. Celeste's teacup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Guilt? But it vanished too quickly for Sebastian to interpret. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "That must have been devastating." Devastating. Sebastian laughed without humor. "I told myself I married a hurricane and was surprised when she destroyed everything in her path. The signs were there from the beginning. I just chose not to see them. Sometimes we fall in love with people who remind us how to feel alive," Celeste said quietly. "Even when we know they might be dangerous." Sebastian studied her face, noting the careful way she chose her words, the shadow that crossed her features. "You sound like you've experienced something similar." "Stories, Mr. Montclair." "Sebastian," he corrected, the intimacy of his first name feeling strange on his tongue after weeks of formal address. "And yes, I suppose we do. Though some people seem better at keeping their stories buried." Celeste's smile was sad and knowing. Buried stories have a way of clawing their way to the surface eventually. Before Sebastian could respond, Luna's voice echoed down the hallway. "Papa, Miss Celeste. I had a bad dream." They found Luna standing at the top of the stairs in her white nightgown, tears tracking down her cheeks. Sebastian started toward her, but Celeste's gentle hand on his arm stopped him. "What did you dream about, sweetheart?" Celeste called up, her voice warm and unafraid. Mama was in her red car again, but this time she was trying to come back. She kept calling my name, but every time I tried to reach her, the car got smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Sebastian's breath caught. Luna had never spoken about dreams of her mother before, had never acknowledged remembering anything about that night. "Dreams about people we love can be scary," Celeste said, climbing the stairs slowly. But sometimes they're just our hearts trying to remember the good parts. Were there good parts? Luna asked, her voice impossibly small. Sebastian waited. For Celeste to deflect, to offer some platitude about heaven or peace. Instead, she sat on the step beside Luna and considered the question seriously. Your mama loved you very much, Celeste said finally. Sometimes love doesn't know how to be safe. It doesn't make it less real. Papa says thinking about mama makes us sad. Celeste glanced down at Sebastian, who stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. Being sad isn't always wrong, Luna. Sometimes being sad means we loved someone important. Sometimes we need to be sad for a while before we can remember how to be happy again. Will you stay with me until I fall asleep? Luna asked. Of course. Sebastian watched Celeste disappear. Into Luna's room, her gentle voice murmuring comfort in the darkness. For the first time in 3 years, his daughter had expressed genuine emotion about her mother's death. And instead of the catastrophe he'd always feared, the world hadn't ended. But as he stood alone in the hallway, Sebastian couldn't shake. The feeling that Celeste knew more about Evangeline's death than a stranger should. The way she'd responded to certain details. The careful phrasing of her condolences. The shadow in her eyes when he'd mentioned the accident. Coincidences made Sebastian nervous. And Celeste Maro was beginning to feel like more than coincidence. In Luna's darkened bedroom, Celeste stroked the little girl's hair until her breathing deepened into sleep. But even after Luna's grip on her hand loosened, Celeste couldn't bring herself to leave. She'd known this moment would come eventually, the moment when Sebastian started asking the right questions, when her carefully constructed identity began to crack. She just hadn't expected it to hurt this much, watching him struggle with his grief, while knowing she held pieces of the truth that could destroy him. The photograph in her room wasn't of a stranger's child. It was of Rosalie Dubois, age 6, who died in a house fire while her Aunt Celeste was supposed to be watching her. The same fire that had killed Celeste's sister and brother-in-law, leaving Celeste as the sole survivor, carrying survivor's guilt like a millstone around her neck. But that wasn't the secret that would shatter Sebastian's world. The real secret was simpler and more devastating. Celeste hadn't just happened across this job posting. She'd sought it out deliberately, drawn by a name she'd recognized from a police report she'd read 3 years ago. A report about a fatal car accident involving Sebastian Montclair, who'd been driving away from the Meridian Hotel at 11:47 p.m. on a rainy October night. The same hotel where Celeste had been working as a photographer's assistant. The same night, she'd watched a beautiful woman with wild red hair storm out of room 412 after a screaming fight with her lover. The same woman who'd grabbed Celeste by the shoulders and begged her not to tell anyone what she'd seen. Please, Evangeline had, whispered mascara streaming down her cheeks. My daughter can never know what kind of mother she had, Celeste had promised, and she'd kept that promise for 3 years. But now, watching Luna learn to trust again, watching Sebastian slowly lower his walls, she wondered if some promises were meant to be broken, because the fight hadn't been with a photographer. It had been with Sebastian's business partner, Marcus Valdez, who'd been embezzling from the Montclair vineyard for 2 years. Evangeline had discovered the theft and threatened to expose him unless he returned the money. Marcus had refused, and in desperation, Evangeline had decided to drive home through the storm to confront Sebastian with the truth. She'd died trying to save her family's legacy, not destroy it. Celeste was the only person alive who knew. The first crack appeared in Sebastian's carefully constructed world on a fog-shrouded morning in November. He'd risen early to review quarterly reports in his study when he heard Luna's voice drifting from the kitchen, animated in a way that made his chest tight with unnamed longing. And then Princess Celeste told the dragon that maybe he wasn't mean. Maybe he was just lonely and scared, Luna was saying, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. Instead of fighting him, she invited him for tea. What happened next? Celeste's voice, warm with genuine interest. They became friends, and the dragon's fire turned into beautiful colors instead of scary flames. Purple and gold, and Luna's voice dropped to a whisper. Red? Sebastian froze in the doorway. They sat at the breakfast table, Luna's coloring book spread between them. But this time, the carefully neutral pages had been abandoned. In their place lay a drawing that made Sebastian's blood run cold, a little girl in a white dress standing beside a magnificent red dragon. Both figures painted in brilliant, forbidden hues. "Luna," Sebastian's voice cut through the morning quiet like broken glass. "What is this?" Luna's face crumpled instantly, the joy draining from her features. "I'm sorry, Papa. Miss Celeste said it was okay to try different colors, but I know the rules go to your room." The words came out harsher than Sebastian intended, but the sight of red crayon on paper sent panic coursing through his veins. Now, Luna fled without another word, leaving Sebastian alone with Celeste, who sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. "I asked you to respect our household policies," Sebastian said, his voice deadly quiet. "Those policies exist for a reason." "Yes, they do." Celeste met his gaze steadily. "They exist because you're terrified that if Luna experiences any joy, any color, any spontaneity, she'll end up like her mother. But you're wrong, Sebastian. You're not protecting her from becoming Evangeline. You're protecting yourself from dealing with your guilt about what really happened that night." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Celeste stood slowly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Sebastian saw steel beneath her careful composure. "Tell me, Sebastian, in all your investigations into the accident, did you ever wonder what Evangeline was doing at the Meridian Hotel that night?" Sebastian's world tilted. He'd never mentioned the hotel to Celeste. The police reports weren't public. "How do you she wasn't there for an affair?" Celeste's voice was steady, relentless. "She was there because she'd discovered that Marcus Valdez had been stealing from your company for 2 years. Embezzling funds, falsifying records, bleeding your vineyard dry while you trusted him completely. The walls of the kitchen seemed to press inward. Marcus Valdez, his business partner of 15 years, his best friend, Luna's godfather. That's impossible. The police found no evidence of the police weren't looking for evidence of embezzlement. They were investigating a drunk driving accident." Celeste moved closer, her eyes never leaving his face. "But Evangeline had documents, Sebastian. Proof. She confronted Marcus that night, demanded he return the money and confess. When he refused, she decided to drive home and tell you everything. You're lying." But even as Sebastian said it, pieces began falling into place. Evangeline's strange behavior in the weeks before her death, her questions about the business, her insistence that something was wrong with the books. He'd dismissed her concerns as paranoia, had been too busy, too trusting, too blind. "She died trying to save your family's legacy," Celeste continued relentlessly. "Not destroy it. She was racing home to warn you, to stop Marcus before he could steal any more. The rain, the speed, she was desperate to reach you before it was too late." Sebastian sank into a chair, the weight of realization crushing down on him. "How do you know this?" Celeste was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I was there." The admission hung between them like smoke from a funeral pyre. "My name wasn't always Celeste Maro," she said. 3 years ago, I was Celeste Dubois, working as a photographer's assistant at the Meridian. I was in the hallway when Evangeline came out of Marcus's room. She was crying, shaking, clutching a briefcase full of evidence. She saw me, and Celeste's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She begged me not to tell anyone what I'd seen," said her daughter, "could never know what kind of mother she'd been. She thought having an affair would be easier for Luna to understand than having a mother who'd been too proud to ask for help. Too stubborn to wait for morning, too desperate to save everyone, to worry about saving herself." Sebastian felt the foundations of his grief shifting, crumbling. 3 years of carefully constructed blame, using his wife's supposed betrayal as a shield against his own guilt, and it had all been built on lies. "Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you tell the police?" "I tried." Celeste wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but more tears kept coming. "But Marcus found out I'd witnessed the confrontation. He offered me money to keep quiet. When I refused, She pushed up the sleeve of her sweater, revealing a scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow, thin but unmistakable. "He tried to kill me. made it look like a suicide attempt. I spent 3 months in psychiatric care, and when I got out, he'd already altered the evidence, discredited my testimony. The police thought I was delusional, grief-stricken over losing my own family. Your family? My sister, her husband, their daughter Rosalie? They died in a fire while I was working that night. While I was watching your wife die for trying to be a hero, Celeste's voice broke completely. I failed everyone, Sebastian, but I couldn't fail Luna. Not when I was the only person left who knew the truth about her mother. Sebastian stared at this woman who'd entered their lives under false pretenses, carrying secrets that could have destroyed them all. Should have destroyed them. Instead, she'd used her knowledge to heal wounds he hadn't even known existed. You came here to tell me, he said slowly. I came here to decide whether you deserve to know, whether the truth would help Luna or destroy her. Celeste met his eyes, hers red-rimmed but steady. I stayed because I realized she needed both truth and love to heal. And because. She didn't finish the sentence, but Sebastian heard the unspoken words anyway. Because somewhere in the process of saving them, they'd begun saving her too. Footsteps on the stairs broke the tension. Luna appeared in the doorway, eyes swollen from crying, her small face a mask of misery. I threw away the dragon picture. She whispered, I'm sorry I was bad. Sebastian looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years. Saw not a miniature adult perfectly controlled, but a 6-year-old girl who'd learned that expressing joy was dangerous, that colors were forbidden, that being herself would make the most important person in her world disappear into grief. He'd been so afraid of losing her the way he'd lost Evangeline that he'd been losing her anyway. Peace, by careful, colorless peace. Luna, Sebastian said, his voice gentler than it had been in months. Come here. She approached cautiously, and Sebastian lifted her onto his lap the way he used to when she was smaller. Before the world became dangerous, before love became a liability. I need to tell you something about your mama, he said, glancing at Celeste, who nodded encouragement. She wasn't bad the night she died. She was trying to protect us, to save our family. The colors you made today, the red dragon your mama, would have loved that. Luna's eyes widened. Really, really? Your mama loved colors. Loved art and beauty and dragons who breathe pretty flames. She would have wanted you to love them too. For the first time in 3 years, Sebastian let himself remember Evangeline not as the reckless woman who'd abandoned them, but as the vibrant, passionate, flawed human being who'd loved them enough to die trying to save them. Can we make another dragon picture? Luna asked tentatively. Sebastian looked at Celeste, this woman who'd carried his family's secrets like stones, who'd sacrificed her own peace to give them truth wrapped in gentleness. Yes, he said. We can make as many dragons as you want. But even as Luna smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her in years, Sebastian knew their troubles were far from over. Because Marcus Valdez was still out there, still free, still dangerous. And now that the truth was finally emerging, Sebastian doubted his former partner would let it see daylight without a fight. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the vineyard. And Sebastian couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Marcus Valdez arrived unannounced on a Tuesday morning, his silver Aston Martin purring up the driveway like a predator scenting blood. Sebastian watched from his office window as his former business partner stepped out, adjusting his Italian suit with the casual arrogance that had once seemed charming but now felt sinister. 3 days had passed since Celeste's revelation. 3 days of Sebastian diving deep into financial records he'd been too trusting to examine before. The evidence was there, hidden in plain sight: doctored invoices, phantom expenses, funds redirected. Through shell companies, Valdez had stolen nearly $2 million over the course of 2 years. Bleeding the vineyard slowly enough that Sebastian hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. Sebastian, my friend, Marcus called out as he entered the office, arms spread wide in greeting. You look terrible. Are you sleeping? I've been doing some reading, Sebastian replied carefully, not moving from behind his desk. Financial reports, mostly. It's fascinating stuff. Something flickered in Marcus's dark eyes, wariness masked by practiced charm. Business keeping you up nights? You know, you can leave the numbers to me. That's what partners are for. Yes, about that partnership. Sebastian opened the folder on his desk, revealing copies of bank statements, transfer records, forged signatures. Care to explain these discrepancies? The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the predator beneath. Marcus glanced at the documents, his expression calculating. I have no idea what you're talking about, he said smoothly. If there are accounting errors, we can review them together. You know how careless bookkeepers can be. The only careless person here was me, Marcus. Careless enough to trust you with my family's legacy while you robbed us blind. Marcus moved closer to the desk, his posture shifting from friendly to threatening. You're making a serious accusation, Sebastian. I hope you have proof to back up these wild theories. I have Evangeline. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face went white, then flushed with rage. Evangeline is dead, he snarled, all pretense of friendship abandoned. Dead because she was a drunk, reckless whore who couldn't handle her liquor or her guilt about cheating on you. Evangeline is dead because she discovered your theft and threatened to expose you, Sebastian said, rising slowly from his chair. She died driving home to warn me about what you'd been doing. And there's someone who can prove it. Marcus's eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting reinforcements. Who? The police investigated thoroughly. There were no witnesses, no. Evidence of foul play, there was a witness, someone you tried very hard to silence. Understanding dawned in Marcus's expression, followed quickly by fury. That crazy photographer's assistant, she's been committed? Sebastian, delusional? No. One would believe her testimony even if she were competent to give it. She's not committed anymore, Marcus. She's here, in this house, taking care of my daughter, and she remembers everything. The office door opened quietly, and Celeste stepped inside, her face pale but determined. Marcus spun toward her, his hand instinctively reaching inside his jacket. Hello, Marcus, Celeste said quietly. It's been 3 years. You look well? You, Marcus breathed, his voice full of venom. You should have stayed buried where I put you. You tried to bury me, Celeste agreed, pushing up her sleeve to reveal the scar on her arm. But I survived. And I remember every word of your conversation with Evangeline that night. Sebastian felt rage building in his chest, white hot and pure. You tried to kill her? She was going to ruin everything. Marcus exploded, abandoning all pretense. Years of careful planning, of building the perfect setup, and that bitch wife of yours had to play detective. Oh, she was going to destroy me. Over money that was practically mine anyway. I built this business as much as you did, Sebastian. I deserved my share. Your share? Sebastian moved around the desk, his fists clenched. You stole from me. From Luna. From Evangeline's memory. I took what I was owed. Marcus pulled a gun from his jacket, pointing it first at Sebastian, then swinging it toward Celeste. And I cleaned up the mess when your wife got too curious for her own good. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Sebastian felt the world shift around him as the final pieces clicked into place. You killed her, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't an accident. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter and triumphant. Oh, it was very much an accident. I followed her from the hotel, planning to reason with her, maybe offer her a cut to keep quiet. But she was driving like a madwoman, crying and hysterical. When she took that curve too fast and lost control, he shrugged. I just didn't call for help as quickly as I might have. Sebastian lunged forward, but Marcus swung the gun toward him, stopping him cold. Stay back, Marcus screamed. This is your fault, Sebastian? If you'd paid attention to your business instead of your books and your wine, none of this would have happened. If you'd satisfied your wife instead of letting her run wild, she'd still be alive. She was satisfied, Celeste said quietly, drawing Marcus's attention back to her. She loved Sebastian completely. She was faithful to him until the day she died. The affair was a lie you spread to cover your tracks. Shut up. Marcus swung, the gun towards Celeste again, his finger tightening on the trigger. You were supposed to die 3 years ago. This time I won't make the same mistake. Neither will I. The voice came from the doorway. Marcus spun around to find Detective Ray Morrison, Sebastian's old college roommate, standing with his weapon drawn and back up behind him. "Marcus Valdez, you're under arrest for embezzlement, attempted murder, and accessory to vehicular manslaughter," Morrison said calmly. "Drop your weapon." Marcus's face cycled through rage, desperation, and finally, resignation. But instead of lowering the gun, he turned it back toward Celeste. "If I'm going down," Marcus snarled, "I'm taking her with me. She should have died years ago." Time fractured into slow motion. Sebastian saw Marcus's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Celeste's eyes widen with acceptance rather than fear, saw his own body moving before his mind could process the decision. He threw himself between Marcus and Celeste just as the gun fired. The bullet caught Sebastian in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the bookshelf. Books tumbled down around him as he slumped to the floor, warm blood spreading across his white shirt. "Papa!" Luna's scream pierced the air. She stood in the doorway, having escaped from Rosa's care to find her father. And now she watched in horror as the most important person in her world collapsed in a pool of spreading red. The sight of Luna broke something in Marcus. His face crumpled as he realized what he'd done, what he'd become. The gun clattered to the floor as Morrison's team swarmed him, but Marcus offered no resistance. He was staring at Luna, with the expression of a man seeing his own damnation reflected in a child's terrified eyes. "Sebastian," Celeste dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound to slow the bleeding. "Stay with me. Luna needs you. I need you." Sebastian's vision blurred, but he managed to focus on Luna's face. "It's okay, baby," he whispered. "Papa's okay. The red doesn't mean bad things anymore. It just means we love each other enough to bleed." Paramedics arrived within minutes, filling the office with urgent voices and efficient movement. As they loaded Sebastian onto a stretcher, he caught Celeste's hand. "The documents," he said weakly. "Make sure Morrison gets everything."
Sure.
"Marcus pays for what he did to Evangeline." "He will," Celeste promised. "But you focus on staying alive. Luna's already lost one parent. She can't lose another." "She won't," Sebastian said, squeezing her fingers with what strength he had left. "She'll have you. Both of you will have each other." As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Sebastian saw Luna clinging to Celeste's side, both of them crying, but neither alone. For the first time in 3 years, his family was complete again, bound together not by shared grief, but by shared love and sacrifice. The last thing he heard before the morphine took him was Luna's voice, strong and clear. Despite her tears, "Miss Celeste, will you tell me about the red dragon again? The one who breathes beautiful fire?" And Celeste's voice, steady and sure. "I'll tell you about all the dragons, sweetheart. The scary ones and the beautiful ones. I'll teach you that sometimes they're the same dragon, just seen from different angles." In the ambulance racing through Napa Valley, Sebastian smiled despite the pain. His daughter was learning that color didn't equal chaos, that love didn't equal loss, that sometimes the most beautiful flames came from the deepest wounds. The reckoning was finally complete. Now the real healing could begin. 6 months after the shooting, Sebastian stood in the renovated sunroom, watching Luna paint with the fierce concentration of an artist discovering her medium. Her canvas blazed with impossible colors, purple horses galloping through golden vineyards, red dragons soaring over emerald seas, pink castles floating on orange clouds. "What do you think, Papa?" she asked, stepping back to admire her work with paint-smudged fingers and a smile that could have powered the valley. "I think your mother would be proud," Sebastian said, meaning it completely for the first time since Evangeline's death. The physical therapy for his shoulder had been grueling, but nothing compared to the emotional work of rebuilding his relationship. With Luna, they'd spent hours talking about Evangeline, not the mythologized saint or vilified sinner he'd created in his grief, but the complex, passionate, flawed woman who'd loved them both enough to die protecting their future. Luna had taken the truth about her mother with remarkable resilience. As if finally understanding the source of her father's pain had freed her to process her own. She still had nightmares occasionally, but now she talked about them instead of suffering in silence. The nightmares were different now to dreams where her mother came back not to haunt but to watch Luna paint, to admire her bold use of colors, to tell her daughter that dragons were meant to fly. Miss Celeste says we should hang it in the hall with the wine portraits, Luna continued, wiping her hands on the smock that had replaced her pristine white dresses. She says art should be where everyone can see it, not hidden away. Smiled at the mention of Celeste, who'd become far more than Luna's nanny over the past months. She was the gravitational center that held their reconstructed family together, the steady presence that made their new normal feel possible rather than terrifying. Miss Celeste is right about many things, Sebastian said. Is she right about? Loving people, being worth the risk of losing them. The question caught Sebastian off guard. Luna's emotional intelligence had grown exponentially since they'd started having real conversations. But she still had the ability to cut straight to the heart of adult complexities with childlike directness. What makes you ask that? Luna tilted, her head studying him with eyes that held too much wisdom for 6 years. Because you love Miss Celeste, and she loves you, but you're both scared to say it.
Yes.
And I think maybe you're worried that if you love her out loud, something bad will happen, like with Mama. Sebastian felt his chest tighten with a familiar flutter of panic. But instead of the crushing weight it used to carry, the fear felt manageable now, survivable. Love is always a risk, he said carefully. But Miss Celeste and I, it's complicated. Luna, we both have things in our past that make trusting difficult. But she saved us, Luna said, with the simple logic of childhood. And you saved her. We're all alive and together and painting dragons. That seems pretty simple to me. Before Sebastian could respond, Celeste appeared in the doorway carrying a tray of lunch. She'd let her hair grow longer over the months, traded her severe navy dresses for flowing skirts and jewel tones that complemented the life returning to her eyes. She looked younger, softer, more like the woman she might have been before tragedy taught her to hide. Lunch is served, she announced, setting the tray on a paint-free section of table. Grilled cheese cut into dragon shapes, as requested. Luna clapped her paint-stained hands together. Perfect. Papa was just telling me about how love is risky, but maybe worth it anyway. Celeste's eyes met Sebastian's over Luna's head, and he saw his own careful hope reflected there. They'd danced around their feelings for months now, both too damaged by loss to risk the vulnerability that love required. But Luna was right. They were alive, together, surrounded by color and possibility. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from the chance of happiness. Luna, Sebastian said, making a decision that would have terrified him 6 months ago. Would you like Miss Celeste to stay with us permanently? Not just as your nanny, but as part of our family? Luna's face lit up like Christmas morning. You mean like a mama? I mean like someone who loves you very much and wants to help raise you and teach you about dragons and art and all the beautiful things in the world? And someone who loves Papa too? Sebastian looked at Celeste, noting the tears gathering in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for Luna. Yes, he said quietly. Someone who loves Papa too. Luna threw herself into Celeste's arms, then stretched to include Sebastian in the embrace. For a moment, they stood there in the paint-splattered sunroom, surrounded by evidence of Luna's artistic explosion, holding each other like survivors of the same shipwreck who'd finally found shore. I have something to tell you both, Celeste said when they finally separated. Marcus's trial ended yesterday. He was convicted on all charges. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Sebastian felt a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying lift from his shoulders. Justice for Evangeline at last. Closure for the nightmare that had shaped their lives for 3 years. Good, Luna said fiercely. Bad people should be punished for hurting the people we love? Yes, they should, Celeste agreed. But good people should be rewarded for their courage, for choosing love over fear, for building something beautiful from broken pieces. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, offering it to Sebastian with shaking hands. I know this is unconventional, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But you saved my life in more ways than one. Gave me a reason to stop running, a place to heal, a family to love. Sebastian Montclair, will you marry me? Sebastian stared at the box, damned at this extraordinary woman who'd entered their lives carrying secrets and stayed to help them uncover truth. Who'd taught them that broken things could be made beautiful, that color was meant to be celebrated, that love was always worth the risk. "Yes," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple platinum band, "but only if you'll let me ask you properly." Sank to one knee in the middle of Luna's art supplies, taking Celeste's paint-stained hand in his. "Celeste Maro, you came into our lives like light returning after a long darkness. You gave me back my daughter, my capacity for joy, my faith that tomorrow could be better than today. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "Yes, to all of it. 2 dragon paintings and horse rides, and teaching Luna that the world is full of beauty waiting to be discovered. To building a life where love isn't something to fear, but something to celebrate." Luna cheered and threw paint-covered confetti made from torn paper into the air, covering them all in a shower of rainbow colors. Sebastian laughed, really laughed for the first time in years, pulling both his girls close as they painted the future in brilliant, impossible hues. Outside the sunroom windows, the Montclair vineyards stretched toward the horizon, row upon row of vines heavy with fruit ready for harvest. The Mediterranean mansion stood solid and welcoming, its rooms slowly filling with color. And laughter again. Storm clouds gathered in the distance, but Sebastian no longer feared the rain. They'd survived the worst storms imaginable and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. Broken in places, yes, but like Japanese kintsugi pottery, the cracks had been filled with gold. It's making them more beautiful for having been damaged and repaired. 3 years after Evangeline's death had frozen their world in colorless grief, Montclair family was learning to live again, not the careful, constrained existence Sebastian had built from fear, but a life painted in bold strokes across a canvas wide enough to hold joy and sorrow, love and loss, all the complex hues that made existence beautiful and terrible and ultimately worthwhile. Luna looked up from her art supplies, her face bright with inspiration. "Can we paint Mama next? Not sad Mama from the red car, but happy Mama dancing in the vineyard, with purple dress and golden hair?" Sebastian felt the familiar pang of grief, but it was gentler now, edged with gratitude rather than guilt. "Sweetheart, we can paint all the versions of Mama, the happy ones and the sad ones, because people are complicated like that. Like dragons," Luna said wisely, "scary and beautiful at the same time." "Exactly like dragons," Celeste agreed, kissing the top of Luna's head before meeting Sebastian's eyes. "The best dragons always are." As evening fell over the Napa Valley, the 3 of them worked together on Luna's painting, adding layers of color and memory to the canvas. Sebastian painted his wife as he'd first fallen in love with her, vibrant, passionate, alive with possibility. Celeste added touches of gold to Evangeline's hair, making her glow like sunlight. Luna painted red roses at her mother's feet, no longer a symbol of blood and loss, but of love and remembrance. When they finished, stood back to admire their collaborative masterpiece. It wasn't technically perfect. Sebastian was no artist, and Luna was still learning, but it was true. It captured not just Evangeline's image, but her essence, the complex woman who'd been wife and mother, victim and hero, the catalyst for their destruction and ultimately their redemption. "She's beautiful," Luna breathed. "She is," Sebastian agreed, wrapping his arms around his daughter and his future wife. "And she would love seeing us like this, happy, together, painting the world in all the colors we can imagine." Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, like scattered paint drops on an infinite canvas. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to overcome, new colors to discover. But tonight, in this moment, the Montclair family was complete. Not the family they'd planned or expected, but the one they'd chosen. The one they'd fought for, bled for, rebuilt from the ashes of their former lives. A family bound not by blood alone, but by the conscious decision to keep choosing love. Keep choosing trust, keep choosing each other despite every reason the world gave them to give up. In the end, Sebastian thought, watching Luna add one final flourish to her mother's painted smile, that was the most beautiful masterpiece of all. Like this video, if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love, and let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers. The end.